So thanks, Tony, for recording. This is our November meeting for South Island Sea Kayaking, our November monthly meeting. We're having it tonight to accommodate our speaker. Very pleased to have a speaker coming to us all the way from Yellowknife, NWT. And so you see him up there in the top left, Dwayne Wohlgemuth, and we'll introduce him later, and interested to what he has to say about the Esker, which he hiked up there. But that's why we're meeting tonight instead of our normal Wednesday evening. So hopefully everybody managed to get that message, and I see lots of you on the screen, so that's great. I'm Alan Campbell. I'm the president right now. We have a number of others who take roles in the club online here, but I won't bother introducing them all, but some of them might have things to announce here. And I have a little list of things to not forget mentioning. So I'll just try to go through those. And if I do forget, please unmute yourself and remind me. Just a general announcement for people who maybe have joined recently, that all of our paddles, the pool sessions, so on, are listed on the website. They will come up regularly with emails, but they're on the website, on the calendar, and you can keep track of them that way and register as a member. So just be aware of that. I don't know if Jenny Sutton's online. Jenny is our instructor liaison person, and she wanted me to mention that after Christmas in January, February, she and the Siska instructors, we have a number of Paddle Canada qualified paddling instructors, are going to do some beginner and early intermediate clinics on currents. And you'll be hearing more about that probably in December as that month rolls around, and you can see what works for you there. January, February is great paddling weather here, so don't be shy about getting in your boat. If you haven't done it before, those are good months to get out on the water, day by day, as we know. Okay, next item is that just to highlight a few things that are on the calendar. One is that there are VHF radio workshops have been planned. One is by Zoom, or yes, they're both by Zoom, but one is not limited, and that's about buying a VHF radio on Tuesday, December 14th. These are both with Edgar Hewlett, who is an instructor and a knowledgeable, not just a kayaker, but a mariner with lots of experience in VHF and has done these courses before. So we're pleased that Edgar's doing them again. On Tuesday, December 7th, he's got a limit of 12 for a workshop about how to use the VHF radio. I think I just see Edgar coming on now. And so that one is limited to 12, but Edgar wanted me to say that if more people are interested, he'd be happy to set up another session or more sessions. So be aware of that. If you apply and you don't get in, you're on a waiting list, he might be able to set up another session to do that. So that's about VHF radios, very important safety gear out here on the coast. I did want to mention that and you've had lots of reminders about this, I realize. Sorry, kind of to pester you with emails sometimes, but it's good to make sure everybody is aware. We have an in-person, very unusual, really, trip planning workshop coming up this weekend, Saturday afternoon at Perks Center in the room just inside to your left there, the main doors. It's on trip planning, and it's going to be set up kind of like a shopping, around the perimeter, people who've agreed to talk about some really interesting trips they've done, bring resource material, give you some ideas about what you might consider. Maybe you'll meet people who you might want to do a trip with while you're there, just a good opportunity. And while you're there, since we haven't had too many in-person opportunities, I'll just say that people who have maybe tried and not succeeded uploading their vaccine cards to our website, here's a chance you could drop by the Perk Center, and one of our happy people there at the little table we'll have outside the room would be happy to, yeah, there she is trying to smile, Lynn. We'll do your card right there, get it done, get it out of the way. And you can also email it, but I'm going to send you yet another email about that probably tomorrow. So, but anyway, just wanted to mention that as well. That's coming up on Saturday afternoon. Also at that time, because we haven't had many times to be together, Debbie, aka Vanna there, yeah, she's going to bring Siska hats, which people have purchased already and just haven't picked up. And she's got quite a number apparently, so she'll have them in a pile with a list. And so if you haven't got your hat and that's convenient for you, drop by the Perk Center between 2 and 4 on Saturday, you can pick up your hat. What else? Oh, just to sort of, we'll have something come out about this, but we're going to redo a workshop, which is by Zoom, but it was a lot of fun. Had some videos about what to wear paddling. That's always comes up this time of year because it's so cold. The air is cold, the water's always cold, but we're going to redo that. We have some videos built into it, but it's kind of a slideshow interactive presentation. And there's about, I don't know, 10 or a dozen people who contributed to this along with myself. So that's going to be on Thursday, December 2nd at 7 p.m. by Zoom. I have from Willie Fast, who is in there someplace, a reminder to people to, if you haven't completed the member survey that he sent out, and you'd like to do so, and we'd like you to do so if you would, you have until tomorrow. It's going to be a final day tomorrow to send that in. I think Willie's had a pretty good response, but the more people respond, the more valid, the things we can learn from the whole group of you as to what you want and what you like and that sort of thing. So you're encouraged to do that, and that's been sent out a couple of times as well. Just a heads up, after Christmas as well, that we're going to get back into, but it will be in March, we're going to get back into our program of spring training. I always like to think about spring about now when it seems really dark and cold out there. So spring training, not so far away. It's only what, 3-4 months, and you're going to be thinking that it's getting warm enough out there to be quite pleasant. So spring training, a whole program of workshops that we have organized to be delivered by commercial partners that we have in the kayak coaching community here, different businesses. And so those are going to be going beginning in about the middle of March, going to around the end of May. And you'll hear a lot more about that, but just a heads up, we've got, I think there's 73 workshops occurring over that period of time with something like 400 spaces. So lots of opportunities for you. And these are all offered at a discount to Siska members. And as well, we're renewing our member discounts for Siska members with each of our partners, and they'll give us usually a 10 or 15% discount on their regular offerings that they offer. And these are really good companies we have here. As I'm sure you know, we have some outstanding paddlers and teachers in our midst. So great to patronize them. What else can I tell you? Let's see. Oh, I've just mentioned on and off about our COVID thing. So obviously, we would like people who haven't yet figured out how to get their BC vaccine card uploaded to get that to us. I mentioned you can come to the Perks. You can also take a screenshot and email it, and the email that you'll get in the next day or so will explain that a little more clearly. But feel free to do that any way you can. And that, I think, brings me to Beth Haysom. And Beth is going to say something about a great idea that she and Ian came up with to promote charitable giving this time of year, called the Giving Tree. Over to you, Beth.
Thank you. I'm Beth Haysom. Next to me, Ian. And first of all, the email went out on Monday. So thank you to those that have already participated. We're off to a good start. But just one thing I was wondering if we could do, given all the emails that are going out, and I'm rather afraid that sometimes things get lost in the shuffle or they go to spam. Would you guys mind raising your hands if you received the fundraiser email on Monday? Ooh. Can you keep doing it, because I'm scrolling through my pages here. Keep your hands up if you're online. Yeah, I was kind of rather afraid of that maybe some of the emails did get lost. So hey, this is my chance to tell you about it, and you can have a look at the tree itself, because I have my very own Vanna here who's going to do a nice description of what you can win.
So this is a driftwood tree. I think
hold on. I have to.
Many people have seen them before. Driftwood tree with lots of sea stars all over it.
Can you see it?
A bit blurry until he stops moving.
And and it actually has lights on it as well.
So it looks lovely already with.
There you go, with a pretty lights as well. And I'm a journalist, so I'm not prone to hyperbole, but value is about $7,850. But what are you laughing at? Anyway, it's worth bidding on.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly a bid. It's a lot.
Oh, yeah.
It's easier than that, actually. So all you have to do, it's easy peasy, is go online and look up Power to Be, Our Place, or Santa's Anonymous. And because the email maybe didn't get to you guys, maybe we should send those links again. And you make your donation, whatever you want. And for Santa's Anonymous, it could be choosing a toy or something like that. And then you send me an email, and then I enter you in the draw for the tree. So you don't even have to tell me how much you put in. It doesn't matter. You just have to tell me that you did it, and I will put you in for the draw for the tree. So I just wanted to say one thing about it, though, is that it always feels good to do things for the community at this time of year, dip in your pocket and help your neighbors. But this year, it's actually more important. It's actually urgent, because I contacted the organizers of the different agencies, and they're having a really tough year. Obviously, with COVID, donations are down, but the need is actually bigger than ever. So they're trying to do twice as much with half the amount of resources. So that's where we come in, and we can totally help. I gave the example in the email that Santa's Anonymous, they've got 1,500 families, and that means 3,000 children. Unbelievable, 3,000 children. It's crazy to think about that, but I heard on the news that BC's got one of the highest child poverty rates of any of the provinces. So, maybe that's where those kind of numbers are coming from. But we can help. All you have to do is participate in the Siska Giving Tree. And oh yeah, there's one last thing. Power to Be sent me a really beautiful video, and it's heartwarming, and I wanted to share a clip with you. And so I think Alan's going to help me with that.
Yep, I'm hoping to. Let's see how that goes here.
Nature and the experiences that one can have in nature should be accessible to all. My inner voice went around in my head telling myself things that I would never be able to do again. A very kind recreational therapist asked, "What do you truly love?" And the answer was so simple to me. It was nature. Driving home from work one evening on a back road, it was about 12 o'clock at night after a long shift. My car rolled, and immediately I went from being physically able to being a C5 level quadriplegic that could move from the shoulder to chest level down. I was searching and lost, and that is a very scary place to be. Nature was going to be an avenue where I could find healing. I was introduced to Power to Be through one of their kayaking programs, and it was scary at first, not knowing if I'd be able to get into that kayak. But once we pushed off into the water, it was so calm. being able to dip that paddle in and take that first deep breath, I knew right then and there that I was going to be okay.
Isn't that beautiful? And
Wow.
says more eloquently than I could. And I know as kayakers, we all totally relate to that. So I don't need to say anything else except please, everyone, get on board, talk up the Siska Giving Tree with your kayaking buddies. Every person, every dollar makes a difference. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Beth. Okay, so I think we have finally finished all of our announcements and things and can move on to Dwayne, who I see is still there. Great. So I'm just going to say a couple of things about you, Dwayne, and then turn it over to you. I had a chance to talk to Dwayne a couple of times because we try to test, the connection for Zoom, make sure it works. And I contacted him. He was at home, and we had some difficulty. And then I realized he's actually not in Yellowknife, which already seems like a long way up north. No, he lives outside Yellowknife, in a cabin where there's not a great, reception service, etc. So tonight, Dwayne very kindly has gone into Yellowknife to a friend's place that has better service, and we won't have any problem. We've already tested that out. But that reinforced for me just kind of how far away the NWT is. I don't know about some of you. Many of you have probably had opportunities to travel up into our the northern part of Canada, but the vastness of the north is something you have to see to believe. I've happened to have been there a couple of times for different reasons in both the Yukon and in the NWT, at very small, very kind of urban parts of them actually, and it just kind of blows you away. So that's one thing about Dwayne. I just wanted to say, this is a man who is doing something exceptional, but he's doing it in an exceptional place. And he is able to relate that in a very engaging way. I had a chance to read through some of his website and other things, and maybe some of you know about Dwayne, because he certainly has been doing this for a while. I won't repeat what we put out to you in the invite there, but I just wanted to emphasize that it's not just Dwayne. And I have not met your wife, Dwayne, but she must be some special lady to have gone on some of these with you. And now your two boys as well. I mean, really? You've got a family that's out there walking and canoeing on the land. And I think that's amazing. That's fantastic. So we're really, really pleased to have you here to talk to us tonight about the Theron Esker, but I'm just already impressed with who you are and what your family is doing. Thanks very much for being here. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. Thank you. It's such a treat to be here. And yeah, such an honor to have a keen and interested crowd of paddlers. I mentioned to Ellen earlier that, yeah, I'm more of a paddler than a hiker, even though I'm talking to you tonight about a hike. But yeah, most of our trips are in canoe. So mostly because there's lots of portages up here, and canoes are easier to portage than kayaks, hey? But yes. So I'm going to try to, here, I've done it before. I'll try to share my PowerPoint screen so you can see my photos. Some wonderful photos to share. And yeah, does that work? Can everyone see my screen now, my presentation?
Works
Yes.
fine.
Yeah, works well.
Yeah, you're good? Okay, beautiful. Great. So yes, so it's awesome to share stories of the Theron Esker with you all. I moved to the NWT in 2006, and in 2019, I was reading a blog by Dave Olson, who is a pilot who lives on the east end of Great Slave Lake. And he had been flying researchers along this Esker, and I hadn't known about this Esker in spite of living here already at that point for like, I guess 15 years or close to it. And it just like floored me that we had, at that point, I only knew it was North America's longest Esker. And I was just so amazed that we had North America's longest Esker right here in the Northwest Territories, and hardly anybody knew about it. It was really only a few researchers that were familiar with the Esker. And so I just thought immediately like, oh boy, I got to hike this thing. We got to put this on the map, you know, and make more people aware of this esker. We have such a geological gem right here in the Northwest Territories. So, so yeah, I immediately started planning to hike it. And because it was an expensive expedition with a flight in, a long flight in and a long flight out, then I decided to apply to the Royal Canadian Geographical Society for funding. And they agreed with the cool, you know, geological gem that it is, and that it needs to be more well known, and decided to choose my hike as their 2020 expedition of the year. So that was great, and thanks so much to them for helping fund the my hike. So, and it was only later when I was talking to Esker researchers in the UK, they actually told me, well, you can actually call it the world's longest esker. So I was like, whoa, the world's longest esker. This is amazing. So, so before I dive into stories and photos from my hike, I'm going to talk a little bit about what an esker is, and also a little bit on the esker's name, where it is with a nice map, and then a little bit about how eskers are created and why they're important. So an esker, I guess you guys down in Vancouver Island probably don't see too many eskers. As far as I know, there's none in southern BC or western BC. In the mountains, western BC wasn't covered with the glaciers during the last ice age. So eskers are dominantly east of the Rockies and even more focused towards northern Canada. But they are sediment that was left behind by a river flowing under a glacier. So the eskers we have in Canada were left by the Laurentide ice sheet, which melted between 12 and 7,000 years ago. And so this photo shows kind of the typical Esker Ridge. So basically the water flows through a tunnel under the esker and deposits sediment, which then collapses into kind of a ridge that you see in this photo. Here's another example of that ridge of an esker. This is more coarse sediment, so it's more cobbles. And the red you see in the photo is actually Arctic bearberry, which is a plant that for some reason really loves the top of those esker, those cobble eskers. And in the fall, as soon as there's a couple frosts, the Arctic bearberry turns this beautiful, vivid red, and you get these awesome photos with that gray granite contrast with the dark red Arctic bearberry. So makes for great photos. This is an image of the Thelon esker at White Wolf Lake. So this is just to give you an idea of what an esker looks like from a satellite image. And you can see it snaking across the lake. There's places where, yeah, there's lake on both sides. And the lighter colored parts you see are mostly sand that doesn't have vegetation on it. So it stands out a lot in a satellite image. This again is just another example of that perfect ridge of the esker. Sometimes you have more than one ridge. And there was even places where there'd be 2 or 3 ridges, and they would intertwine and weave just like braided hair. It was like so incredible to see sometimes, where you have these 3 ridges that just meander back and forth over top of each other. Yeah, super cool. It's amazing to think that these are made by nature. And the eskers can be sand or cobbles or even larger rocks. And where the esker is made of sand, it's usually flatter and it erodes more easily. And so this is an example of kind of a sandy, more spread out area. And even in these areas, the animals seem to still want to take the same path. So you can see the game trail right down the sand of the esker. And so you might be curious why I wanted to hike this esker. So I explained a little bit earlier of just like, this is an amazing geological gem to have the world's longest esker right here in the Northwest Territories. And that alone gave me enough motivation to hike it. But the fact that it wasn't very well known. And also I realized too that people in northern Canada have a pretty good awareness of eskers because they're around us more, but in southern Canada, eskers are not very well known, but they're really, they're like the mountains of the tundra, and they're super important for many reasons. So, and also the personal challenge, I had never done a solo trip, and pretty early on, I decided, well, this is going to be a good solo trip. It'd be hard to find someone I would really want to be alone on the tundra with for 40 days over an intense hike. So I decided to, yeah, just do it as a solo trip. And it was my first long solo trip. So the reason I talk about the Eskers name is that it touches on an issue that has been front and center in the news a lot recently, is reconciliation. And we have a lot of names in the north that are colonial names that have no relevance to north and no relevance to the people that lived here. And so when I first learned about the Esker and was first planning for this trip, all of the research that had been done on this Esker in the last, say, 10 years was referring to it as the Exeter Lake Esker. And researchers had to choose a name because this Esker still does not have an officially approved name in Canada. And so researchers chose to call it the Exeter Lake Esker because indicator minerals for diamonds were found on this Esker at Exeter Lake. So basically, prospecting on this Esker led to the development of the diamond mines in the Northwest Territories. And prior to that discovery, Canada didn't have any diamond mines. So now there's 3 operating diamond mines in the Northwest Territories, all because of that discovery on this Esker. So for those researchers, this was a pretty prominent link and made sense to name it after the lake where that discovery was. But anyways, long story short, I researched the source of that name and realized that Exeter Lake was named after HMS Exeter, this battleship that fought off of South America during World War II. And it's pretty hard to find a name that's more irrelevant to the northern Canada. And so I thought, well, there must be a better name, and realized that that Esker had also been in the past referred to as the Thelon Esker. And Thelon comes from Theludezith, which means fish or whitefish. And it's also the name of the Thelon River. So it's a name that has Aboriginal roots. So it makes a lot more sense. And hopefully sometime in the future, the NWT will go through the process and actually officially give this Esker an approved name. Another example of Eskers being ignored, we actually don't have a single Esker in the Northwest Territories that has an official name. Nunavut has 3, and there's a number of them in southern Canada that have names, but none in the Northwest Territories yet. So I'm going to try to go further with this, and maybe we can find names from Aboriginal people that travel and use these Eskers, and give a few more Eskers official names in the Northwest Territories. So this is this gives you an idea of where the Esker is. So the eastern end of the Thelon Esker is right at the Nunavut Northwest Territories border, just west of Dubont Lake. And then it goes northwest all the way to a river called the Acasta River. So it's almost 800 kilometers long. It's that red line, basically the red line on the map. And it's almost entirely in the tundra. So there's only a tiny portion on the western end that's in tree line. This is an Esker map of kind of eastern Canada. And they're color coded by length. So the Thelon Esker stands out a lot because it's red and it's by far the longest Esker in Canada. Most of the Eskers are like 200 kilometers or less. But this gives you an idea of how many Eskers there are. There's over 20,000 Eskers in Canada. And they all radiate outwards from kind of the point where where the ice sheet disappeared last. So in Nunavut, kind of centered in Nunavut, and then northern Quebec, Labrador there as well, is kind of where the last remnant ice sheet was. And so they all kind of radiate out from that point following the water flow as the glacier melted. And I'll try to be really brief on this, but this is just a little diagram that gives you an idea of how an esker is made. So the water drops through a crack in the glacier and then runs down below the glacier and then flows through an ice tunnel. And down below the glacier, it picks up sediment from the ground and from dirty ice. And then when those massive glaciers were melting, there was often a lake at the edge of the ice. And so that lake slows down the water in that tunnel and makes it fill the tunnel. And then the sediment, because the water's going slower, the sediment settles out and fills the tunnel, which then collapses and leaves the ridge of the esker behind. If you have more questions, we can go in quite Q&A, but I won't go into more detail than that. This is just a tunnel to give you an idea, an ice tunnel. Okay, and so why eskers are important. So there's a lot of denning animals that live on the eskers. So grizzlies, ground squirrels, foxes, and wolves, just because a lot of the tundra is really wet and rocky and boggy ground and has permafrost below it. So the eskers provide much better denning sites because they can get up above water table and dig into ground that's like sand or fine gravel. That's a lot easier to dig in. And the eskers are also much easier to walk on. So then caribou use them for their migratory routes. Another reason they're important is archaeological sites. So there was a study in the Slave Geological Province. That's basically the geographical area where the diamond mines are now in the Northwest Territories. And over 60% of the archaeological sites that were found and studied were on eskers, even though the eskers are only about 5% of the land. So Aboriginal people in the past really had a preference for eskers because they're good. They provide really good views of the land, so they're good for hunting. And they also provide shelter from the wind and also provide fairly flat, dry places to camp. So this is actually not a photo from this hike, but from a previous hike that Leanne and I did on the Arctic coast. And we found this Inuit tent ring so well placed still, like so visible on the top of an esker. And these kind of flat rocks were used to pinch hide shelters. So they would have a hide tent there basically and use rocks around the edge to pinch the hide down. And of course, also eskers have been important for prospecting in the north. So they're used a lot by prospectors to find minerals, and sampling of the Thelon esker is what led to the discovery of our diamond mines in the Northwest Territories. Kimberlite is probably a word you don't hear too much down there, but a kimberlite is basically the feature, the geological feature where diamonds are present. Okay, so then enough of that. I'll tell you about my hike. So yeah, the Esker is nearly 800 kilometers and I took about 40 days to hike it. There's a lot of water crossings along the way, both lakes and rivers. And so I took a little inflatable boat and kept track of my crossings, and I did 54 inflatable boat crossings along the way. The longest one was about a kilometer and a half. And there you see the dates of my hike as well. So it was July 26th to September 5th of 2020. And so, yeah, talking about remote, if you think Yellowknife's remote, so the eastern end of the Esker is probably one of the most remote places you can get to in Canada without going to like the most northerly islands like Ellesmere Island. So in the mainland Canada, this is crazy remote. Where I started, the three nearest communities to me were Baker Lake, Nunavut, which is 350 kilometers to the northeast. And then there's Lutzel Cay, which is a community on Great Slave Lake that's 425 kilometers to the west. And then there's another community, Stony Rapids, Saskatchewan, which is 450 kilometers to the south. So those are the three nearest communities, and all of them have populations, of 1,000 or less. I think Baker Lake might be over 1,000, but they're all pretty small, small communities. And so the plane flies away and I'm here alone, and it's a pretty vast wilderness. So yeah, definitely the mental, you know, imagining myself like, oh, that first day landing. Oof. Yeah. And so one thing that I chose to do this hike late in the summer because I would have less bugs and I would have cooler weather, which would be easier for hiking. But luck have it, I had a heat wave for the first 2 weeks and the black flies were horrendous. And even after doing many, many trips in the Northwest Territories, I didn't imagine and was not prepared for how bad the bugs were. And but you always have to make a few dumb decisions to get some good stories, I guess. And I only brought a head net. So the first 2 afternoons, when the weather was too hot to hike anyway, I set up my tent and I spent my time sewing my head net onto my shirt to make it a permanent bug shirt. And the head net had some elastic on it. So I took that elastic off and I sewed it around the cuffs of my shirt so that they would be tight so the black flies couldn't crawl up and under my shirt. And so between 2 afternoons and a lot of thread, I had my bug shirt, my shirt and my head net sewed into a full bug shirt. But also during the heat, there were some really nice moments, and the wind really is, you really appreciate the wind when the bugs are bad. So up on high points on the top of the Esker, when there was a lot of wind, were those precious moments that I could take off my bug shirt. And then, because it was so hot, it was the only thing I was wearing. So I was either topless or with a bug shirt. And so I spent a lot of time swimming as well on those nice windy days when the bugs were being blown away. And it was also too hot to hike in the afternoon. So I would get up super early and hike. I would do most of my kilometers before 11 a.m. and then I'd relax for a lot of the afternoon until it started to cool down, and then do a couple more hours in the late afternoon. And the bugs were so bad at the beginning too. I've never done this on any trip before, but I really wasn't willing to cook outside with the crazy black flies. And lucky for me, I only needed to cook once a day. So my breakfast and lunches were all they didn't require cooking. And so I was able to eat most of my food without cooking. And I just started eating lots of berries. And I was salt deprived in the heat too. So I started putting salt on my granola. And so these berries, you might not be familiar with. These are actually cloudberries. They're quite similar in texture and appearance to a raspberry, but yellow. They taste a bit like peaches though. And they grow on a really tiny low plant. It's only a couple inches tall really. But I ate a lot of them. So this is the boat that I had. And during that heat wave, the water crossings were like so fun and so enjoyable. And I was lucky enough to have a lot of tailwinds. And so I started doing longer water crossings than I had originally planned for, to reduce how far I had to hike around lakes to come back to the Esker, because the Esker disappears basically under lakes in a lot of places. And so in those places, I would have to hike around on the edge of the lake to return to the Esker. So I started doing longer water crossings, and those water crossings were originally in the planning stage one of the things that I feared the most. There's so much wind on the tundra that I was definitely fearful of the water crossings, and imagined that I would be spending a lot of time waiting for the wind to die before I could cross. But yeah, I mean, crazy lucky, or chose the right direction, but I had a lot of tailwinds and I lost 2 hours during the entire trip waiting for wind. Like, that was crazy. No, I never would have guessed. So, and for paddling, I chose not to use a regular paddle. Having kind of a breakdown kayak paddle was one option, but in the end, I chose to have these little swim paddles that you just strap onto your hands, and they were quite fast and actually got less water in the boat than my experiment with a kayak paddle, and they were way lighter. and they packed up so much easier in my backpack. So the combination of the inflatable boat and my hand paddles was less than 2 pounds of weight. And so this is kind of where I did a lot of my swimming, is in these little, they're called Kettle Lakes. Basically, when the glacier was receding, it would leave behind these big chunks of ice. And then when those chunks of ice melted, they would leave behind this beautiful little circular pond. And this is far enough north that those ponds are still really good water quality. They're not all full of algae or green. They're still super clear. And so I would swim in a lot of these, and the water was just beautifully warm during that heat wave. You see a lot of trees in this photo. It's technically above tree line, but this is east of the Thelon River in what we call kind of the Thelon Oasis. There's an area around the Thelon River that is it's much further north than the tree line, but somehow it's a little zone there that has its own kind of microclimate and actually has quite a few spruce trees. And there's even moose in this country, way north of tree line. So. And so also in that heat wave at the beginning, a lot of the area east of the Thelon River at the beginning of the hike was a lot of sand. So sand, hundreds of acres of sand, and made for a relatively easy hiking, and was a relatively continuous esker. So there's not very many gaps in the esker. This was a little ways further back. I was trying to take a photo of this. This was probably the biggest zone of sand that I saw on the entire hike. And I'm taking a photo, and all of a sudden one of the rocks stands up. And here it's a muskox. And in the middle of 100 acres of sand on a crazy hot day.
See, I thought that was a bird.
Yeah, it's over 25 degrees. And here's this muskox in the middle of the sand with his like 1 foot thick coat. I'm like, how is this muskox not overheating? It's crazy. But yeah, it was there hanging out in 100 acres of sand. This photo is kind of getting into the geology a little bit of eskers, but on the barrens, a lot of the eskers, there hasn't been enough research to prove this, but it's believed that most of them have ice cores. So basically, the middle of the esker is either pure ice or is just ice saturated sediment. So basically the gravel and sand in the middle of the esker is just saturated with ice. And so in the summer, you get water flowing out of the esker. So here there was a bit of a horseshoe shape to the esker, and there's a stream flowing straight out of the side of the esker, just like a spring. But it's basically that ice core melting during those summer months. And so as I progressed west, kind of the heat wave stopped about the same time that I reached rocky country. So this area has less rocks and gravel and material above the bedrock. So it's a little bit more Canadian shield. And so there wasn't as much sediment, which is also called glacial till. There wasn't as much sediment to create the esker. And so there's more gaps in the esker, and there's a lot more bedrock, and the rocks are more jagged, and there's not as much sand. And so it was a little bit tougher hiking, and slowed me down some. And there was also larger, colder lakes that required more lake water crossings. So this is just a map of that kind of rocky country area. It centers around Clinton, Colden, and Elmer Lake, if anyone has been to the Northwest Territories. But anyways, those are huge lakes. And the esker disappears in a lot of places on small lakes or bays. And so, so I just had to hike around or do long water crossings to get across those places. And again, I usually tried to camp near the esker because it can provide wind shelter from storms. And there was a couple times in this rocky area where I would be forced to camp in the wide open. And I didn't like to camp in the wide open because storms on the tundra can be crazy winds, can bring crazy winds. And so I definitely did not want to wake up in the middle of the night having to repeg my tent or chase my tent off the tundra, you know, especially being solo. So I was trying to minimize risk for sure. This is one of the water crossings that I did in that rocky area without the boat though. I walked across this rapid, and in hindsight, I should have gone upstream where the river was deep and slow and used my boat, because that would have been a lot safer. This was a bit of a treacherous crossing. And so again, in this rocky area, I didn't have really good high points for those warm days that were buggy. Because the esker wasn't as tall and wasn't as well formed. And so sometimes I'd have to find bedrock outcrops. Like this one, I went up there for a snack because there was a bit more breeze up high and a few less bugs. And because the weather now was a bit cooler, then I started cooking. And one of the things that I gathered off the land a lot was mushrooms. And so these are bolete mushrooms, and they're massive. They grow everywhere on the esker, and I ate a lot of them. And yeah, this was a prime specimen that I was pretty impressed by. It's huge. And so this is how I cooked on my hike. I made a twig stove with 2 tin cans, so 1 tin can inside of the other. And by having 1 can inside the other, then the outer can doesn't get crazy hot, and I can just set it straight on the ground and it won't cause a fire, and there's pretty minimal fire risk. You can see the flame shooting a bit out the top, but the bottom doesn't get crazy hot. So yeah. And so another little thing that I discovered in this kind of rocky stretch on the Canadian Shield there, while I was out hiking, I realized that the border that I had drawn on my maps from Google Earth were actually wrong. My InReach maps, which I trusted more, showed the border in a different place. And so afterwards I researched a bit, and Google Maps doesn't have the NWT Nunavut border in the right place. And it's actually 8 kilometers off at this location. And so I did a little bit of research to see if anybody else had found this. And sure enough, as far back as 2011, there's a surveying company called Olerhead and Associates that had done some surveying on the border and discovered that, yeah, that Google Earth was wrong. And there was even a mine that thought they were well inside of Nunavut border, but discovered during the survey that they were almost in the Northwest Territories. So yeah, it was a pretty cool discovery. And hopefully Google Maps will get their border right sometime in the future. And so, yeah, I realized just at the very beginning when we were all logging on that, yeah, Vancouver Island, I remember I've been there a few times to Vancouver Island. When I was a kid, we went fishing on at Telegraph Cove on the northeast coast there for salmon. Anyways, I remember realized that you don't actually have grizzlies on Vancouver Island, but Ellen mentioned there's maybe been a few spotted, hey, so you might have a few. Anyways, there's lots of grizzlies in the Barrens, and I saw 9 along my hike. And I'll tell you one little bear story that was interesting. And I took along a little monocular, just a little monocular, to be able to see animals in the distance and to hopefully know if some object was a grizzly or some other animal, so that I could either you know, avoid it or know it wasn't a grizzly or whatnot. And one day I saw this suspicious looking sized rock on the esker. It was maybe 200 meters away. And so I pulled out my monocular and I'm looking at it through the monocular, and I watch it for a little while and decide, no, it's just a rock. And I'm just about to take my monocular away from my eye, convinced it's a rock, when all of a sudden it moves. I'm like, oh no, okay, it is a grizzly. It was a sleeping grizzly. And so then, of course, the grizzlies are all on the esker. They're always in my path. So I need to find a way to get around them, or I need to sit tight and wait for them to move. But so this grizzly, I decided, well, I could go around to the left, but I'd be upwind of him, so he'd smell me and definitely know I was there. And there wasn't much room. There was a lake next to the esker on the upwind side. So I decided to go downwind. I had a lot more space to get further away from him. And so I climbed down the esker and I'm starting to kind of make a big circle around, when all of a sudden the bear just stands up and walks off the esker towards me. And I think it was just incidental, but he immediately spotted me because I'm in the middle of the tundra. I'm like a tree in the middle of a prairie. And I thought, okay, well, here we go. So I pull out my bear spray, you know, so it's ready. And I also took handheld marine flares. I don't know if any of you use them in kayaks, I doubt it, but motorboats often have handheld marine flares. They're, you just hold them in your hand and you take the lid off and strike it. And then you have basically a torch in your hand for about 3 minutes. And so some people use them for bear protection. And I thought they'd be a good last resort backup to bear spray, especially on the tundra where you sometimes get a lot of wind and your bear spray can be pretty ineffective in those high wind situations. I thought maybe the flares would be better. Anyway, so I got them ready and the bear's walking straight towards me and it disappears in this tiny little dip. And I took along some songs by a friend of mine in Yellowknife, Ryan McCord, and I memorized them and started singing them as my song when there was bears were close or when I didn't have good visibility, just to make sure I made bears aware of my presence. And so I started singing one song and I got through the entire song and I still didn't see the bear. And I had good visibility in all directions. I thought that bear hasn't gone anywhere. It's still in that little dip. So then I decided, well, I'm going to back up and go back up the esker. So I backed up and started climbing back up the esker. And pretty quickly I could see the bear again. And sure enough, it had laid down in that little dip. So it had walked towards me to within maybe about 100 meters and then just laid down. And that made me a little bit nervous for sure. I thought, wow, okay. Like he knew I was there. I was making noise and trying to make the bear totally aware of my presence. And the bear just decided to lay down. Maybe waiting for me to walk past, I don't know. But anyway, so as soon as I could see the bear again, then the bear decides to stand up and walk towards me again. It's like, oh no, okay, this isn't good. So the bear starts walking towards me, but then also doing a little bit of a circle, because typically the bears would try to circle and get downwind to get your scent. And I guess that helps them know what you are, right? So the bear kind of walked towards me and kind of a little bit of a circle around me. And it's slowly coming downwind, but also climbing up the side of the esker. And during this time, I continued to back up the esker. So I eventually got to the top of the esker. So I'm on good flat ground with good footing. And now I'm thinking, okay, this is a bear that's going to need bear spray. So the bear's climbing up the side of the esker, kind of in a little bit of a circle. And it's getting like 30, 40 feet from me. And I'm like, oof, yeah, this is okay, bear spray time, you know. But just as the bear like came up that esker and was getting really close, it got right downwind. That's about the time that it kind of circled straight downwind of me. And it was like a firecracker went off in that bear's head. It had never flinched with all of the noise I made and all of the singing and everything. It didn't show any signs of fear or flinch or nothing. And all of a sudden, when it caught my scent, it was just like firecracker. And that bear just ran. It just turned and took off and it ran full tilt as long as I could see it. And there was this lake studded with boulders. And the bear just ran right through the middle of it. And there's water spraying everywhere. And I'm like, oh, ouch, poor bear. But it was amazing to see its decision to it just took off, like the fear of God in it, you know? And that was one thing that happened with a few bears. None of the others got that close, but human scent seemed to be the most convincing thing. So I realized eventually that if I needed to get around a bear, I just had to go upwind so that it could smell me. And once it would smell me, then it would take off or avoid me. One more thing about bears I'll share. There was some researchers that did some bear research, grizzly research on the esker, and they were leaving these scratching posts, and they could take the bears would use the posts for scratching, and then the researchers could come later and take hair samples and then do DNA analysis and figure out how many bears were in that area. So they were using it to estimate bear population. And this I just have to share. It's a great bear scat. It's probably the best bear scat I've ever seen. It was stretched over probably about 8 feet. And it was a bear that was obviously eating a lot of blueberries and moving at the time that it decided to leave its number 2 behind. So after this cold, or I guess kind of at the end of this rocky Canadian Shield stretch is where I came to what I'm calling the Diamond District, but basically the area where the diamond mines are in the Northwest Territories. And so there's a haul road at the Acadie Diamond Mine that crosses the Esker. And so I met a few of the employees of the mine there on the road, and they, because I was crossing their road, they wanted to know when I was crossing, and they brought me cookies and fruit and even some chocolate bars. And they also emptied my GPS for me because it was getting full because I was tracking my route. So that was much appreciated. So, but again, in this area, there's been a lot of prospecting in the past, and there's a lot more signs of humans. So, and just, I mentioned it earlier, but yeah, these diamond mines were developed because of a sample that was taken from this esker that directly led to the discovery of diamonds and then the development of diamond mines in the Northwest Territories. And those 3 mines made Canada a major world producer. We're in the top 5, I believe, still of in the world of diamond producers. So, and then not long after I leave the diamond mines behind, there's a research station right on the Esker that I went past, and I got a food drop here. And it's a pretty important research station in the Northwest Territories because it's government operated, but it facilitates research and monitoring of the tundra ecosystem. So there's researchers from all over Canada and really all over the world that come to this research station to do all kinds of research on the tundra ecosystem. So, and they do the Northwest Territories also does a student camp at this research station every summer. So there's a number of high school students that come for about a week every summer as well to learn about the tundra ecosystem. And then not long after leaving that research station, I crossed the Coppermine River at Lake Providence. And then there's this beautiful stretch of the Esker from there to the west. It's about 110 kilometers long that I decided if I ever go back to hike part of this Esker again, this will be the stretch that I hike. There's very few gaps in the Esker. The water crossings are relatively simple. It's beautiful scenery, gorgeous, and it's not too crazy far from Yellowknife either as far as flights and getting there. And so I actually have 2 friends, even one of the place where I'm presenting from today and talking to you from today, this friend actually, him and one more person hiked this portion of the Esker this summer. So already I was able to convince 2 people, 2 friends to, yeah, to hike this portion of the Esker. So. And these are just photos from that stretch, that 110 kilometer stretch. The top photo is the Starvation River. It's the only waterfall that I saw on the entire Esker, the only waterfall close to the Esker. And the Starvation River is named for the Franklin expedition, the first overland Franklin expedition that went overland to the Arctic coast. And Franklin lost a few of his men in this area on his way back of starvation. And so this river and the lake it comes out of were named for that expedition. So it's the Starvation River. And then the bottom image is just a beautiful image near White Wolf Lake of the Esker and some of the small lakes beside the Esker. And again, more beautiful sandy Esker where you can see the animals all take the same path. They always in a field of sand, they still have their game trail. And also in that same stretch, there's an abandoned caribou hunting camp. You may have heard, I think probably your paddling crowd probably is aware of the kind of severe decline in the caribou in northern Canada over the recent decade or two maybe. And guided hunting was canceled in 2010 in the Northwest Territories. And so that's when this caribou hunting camp stopped operating. And basically everything was just left there. So it's been abandoned basically. And during my entire hike, I expected to see a lot more caribou, but I only saw 6 caribou for the entire hike. And I saw more grizzlies even than caribou. So, and 32 muskox, but yeah, it's a little sad to see stuff left on the land for sure. Hopefully it'll be cleaned up sometime. And so now I'm getting kind of towards the end of August and towards the end of my hike. The cold weather started coming, so I was getting frost at night regularly and ice on puddles and ice in my water bottle at night. But those tundra colors, once the frost hits those plants and they change color, the colors just become so amazing. There's just a photo I got of dwarf birch and the crystals, the ice crystals that grew on the leaves overnight. And so now, right towards the end of the Esker is when I started entering the tree line. So it's only about the last 20 kilometers of the Esker that are in tree line, but here you can really see the thick forest has begun. So I'm really truly in the trees again. And I was lucky enough for the last couple of days that I got some beautiful sunny weather at the very end and a couple beautiful days to finish on. So I mean, I was on a high anyway, finishing this kind of expedition, but the beautiful sunny days at the end just topped it off. And yeah, and I think I probably lost about 20 pounds in the hike, but whatever, that's no big deal. It's normal on that kind of an expedition, I felt. Yeah. And so, yeah, some last steps that I want to kind of pursue over the next while is trying to have this Esker officially named. And there's a government or a division at the museum and the government here that has a cultural place names mandate. And so hopefully through them, we can work to give this Esker an official name. And then, yeah, I'd like to see other Eskers be named using Aboriginal or other relevant Northern names. So perhaps we're actually lucky that Eskers have not been given official names in the past, because a lot of those names would have been imposed kind of colonial names. And now we have the opportunity to name them with more Northern relevant and Aboriginal names. And I've also been curious about maybe whether this Esker could eventually become a World Heritage Site. It's such a unique geological feature, being the world's longest Esker and entirely within the Northwest Territories. So maybe someday it could be, you know, a World Heritage Site. So, and I guess the last thing is, if you ever get a chance to hike an Esker while you're doing a canoe trip or visiting the North sometime, do it. Even with a few bugs, it's still amazing just to see how Eskers are created and how they look and the animals that live on them. It's, yeah, and the berries that grow on them. They're an amazing feature for sure. And so, yeah, thank you to the Royal Canadian Geographic Society for helping fund my hike. And I also got a little sponsorship from MEC and Seek Outside. So thanks to them as well. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have. And yeah, a very huge pleasure to be able to share stories and share this hike with all of you. Thank you.
Nice.
Thanks, Dwayne. That was great. If you do have time, there are a few questions have cropped up here.
Yes.
Just looking at the chats here.
Perfect. Yeah, I just opened it too, so I can see.
Yeah,
them.
okay, great. There's just a lot of kudos here as well, but some pointing out that we do have some Eskers down here. They're small ones, but there are
Okay.
some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And then right at the end, somebody was saying, well, where does the word Esker come from?
Yeah, I did look that up once. It's been a while, but I think it is a Latin word. It comes from Esker, I think the Latin name means ridge. It's fairly simple roots as far as where the word comes from. I'm sorry, I don't remember it better than that, but yeah, I think it's Latin.
Okay. Daytime and water temperatures when you were in your heat wave there, what was it reaching?
Yeah, you know, I had a little thermometer with me, and I went and lost it after the first week. That was the one little piece of gear that I lost on my hike. But a couple of the days at the beginning of the heat wave were just over 30 degrees. So they were like 30, 31 kind of, which might not seem so hot, but I'm not accustomed to that heat. So for me in the Northwest Territories, and I wasn't expecting that kind of hot weather, and hiking in the blazing sun, because a lot of those hot days didn't really have much wind, and there's no shade either. So
You want to say onto that one?
they sure felt hot. Wow.
What did you eat especially when you didn't have the chance to cook things there, Dwayne?
Yeah, so I planned all my breakfasts just to be granola. So all I took for breakfast was granola and peanut butter. So that was easy. And then I didn't actually plan for a real true lunch. I just took a lot of snacks for eating during the day. So I had a lot of nuts, and I make my own jerky from bison. So I had a lot of bison jerky and a little bit of moose jerky, and nuts and dried fruit for during the day. And then my suppers required cooking. I took a lot of lentils and rice and quinoa for suppers, but obviously I couldn't cook those then. But what I did was I picked a lot of berries. And so for breakfast, I would just have berries and granola. And then I saved my peanut butter. And so for suppers, I would typically just eat berries and peanut butter. So I would eat like, you know, a half or 3/4 of a liter of berries with this huge serving of peanut butter. So that was my supper for the majority of those first 2 weeks.
Wonder you lost 20 pounds.
Yeah. I think I lost weight during those. Most of the weight I think I lost during that heat wave when I wasn't cooking. But I also wasn't very hungry. Just the heat. I don't know. I find I can't eat a lot when it's so hot. So
right.
Yeah, so it was good. And then that meant that I had more food and bigger rations for later in the hike too, when it was a bit cooler and I was also more hungry. So.
Okay, some more questions. Can you talk about how climate change impacts the Esker? Have you seen any signs of that?
Yeah, some signs. So probably, definitely the most obvious one is that in those places where the Esker has multiple ridges, so you'll have 2 or 3 ridges, then you get these really high elevation, high for an Esker, you get these high ponds, kind of, so between a couple of ridges, you'll have a pond that's up there that's maybe 30 meters above all the surrounding landscape. And you have a pond up there and you wonder, why is there a pond? Well, that pond only exists because of the ice core in the Esker, because otherwise it would just leak through the Esker. But that ice core retains that pond. And so you can actually see a good number of places along the Esker where those ponds, where there used to be a pond and there isn't anymore. So you can totally see the water line and see that there's no vegetation growing, but the ice core has melted enough that those ponds have now drained. So that was probably the biggest sign that, of climate change, just realizing that the ice cores in those Eskers are shrinking, and so then they don't retain those ponds at the top. Yeah.
Okay, and somebody would like to know what you do up in Yellowknife. They say YK. What's your job? What's your profession?
Yeah, so by training, I'm an engineer, and I worked for a number of years working on energy management for public buildings for the government of the Northwest Territories. Totally unrelated to paddling and hiking, but I started having tendonitis issues in my wrists and elbows, and I can't work at a computer much anymore. And so I quit doing engineering completely. And lucky for us, our life at the cabin is pretty inexpensive now. And so I'm able to get away with just working part-time gigs here and there. yeah, so now I don't really have a career. I just do odd jobs here and there, things that are interesting to me and kind of give me satisfaction, but I don't do desk jobs anymore.
Well, lucky you. There's a question here about how hard was it walking on the sand? What was it like? Different than beach sand or what?
You know, pretty similar actually, pretty similar to beach sand, maybe a little, yeah, it's maybe a little worse depending on the beach, I guess, but the sand is really dry and really loose. So yeah, it was definitely not ideal walking material. It's so your foot slides back 2 inches for every step, right?
Right.
And so I tried not to walk on the total bare sand. The vegetated sand or just coarse gravel was a lot better walking, a lot less energetic for sure, a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. And was it daylight all the time when you were doing this hike? Was July through August?
Yeah, the beginning definitely was almost always daylight. When I started late July and early August, sunrise was at like 3:30 a.m. And because of the heat in those first 2 weeks, I was getting up super early to hike, and my earliest morning was 3:30 a.m. I got up for sunrise, so I was hiking by sunrise, and that was that was a beautiful moment. I'll remember that morning forever. But definitely by the end of the hike, by early September, the last week, the days were getting a lot shorter, and so then there was definitely a decent dark night. So, yeah.
And water, Dwayne, did you filter lake or river water or?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I've lived in the Northwest Territories long enough to I guess maybe it's not about living here long enough. I guess when I moved to the Northwest Territories and first started canoeing, I just was like, wow, the water up here is so clean. I'm just drinking the water straight up. And so ever since I've lived in the Northwest Territories, I've never filtered water here. I shouldn't say never. There are a couple routes, a couple places that we've paddled where there's really silty water and then we do filter it, or a few little rivers and creeks that we know people have gotten Giardia or other parasites from. But for the most part, we don't filter water. And on this hike, I always drank the water straight up. So I just filled my water bottle straight from a small lake or a river and would just drink it straight.
Gene wants to know, was it as hot this year, 2021, as the year you went?
Yeah, we actually had some crazy heat waves this summer. We broke a few temperature records in the Northwest Territories, and I don't know exactly what it would have been like on the tundra this summer, but yeah, Yellowknife broke a few all-time temperature records this summer, and we did a couple short paddling trips this summer, and we were actually out paddling during 2 of the kind of hottest periods this summer, and it was well over 30 degrees in Yellowknife. I think we hit 33 or something, and that was a record for Yellowknife. So yeah.
Somebody wants to know, were there any pingos on this section? And I'd like to know what a pingo is.
Yes, yeah, we've seen pingos before on canoe trips and hiking trips, but there weren't any pingos on this section, and I don't know the formation of pingos well enough to know exactly why they're not in this area, but basically a pingo is basically like almost like a pyramid, but basically a dome, a round hill that comes up, and it's created by ice. There's basically water flow under the pingo or under the tundra that over years freezes and pushes the land up. And so you get this huge, it's almost like a volcano, if you can imagine what a volcano looks like, but it's ground being pushed up by ice that just keeps freezing every year and pushing the land up. They're super cool features. They look so amazing. They really do kind of look like a volcano often. There's some that are kind of eroded and have more of a round top, but one that we saw on the Arctic coast that we got really close to during that hike was truly looks just like a volcano, but it's actually ice erupting and pushing the land up. And it's kind of water flow under the pingo that's freezing and providing more water every year that kind of just slowly keeps pushing it up.
Don wants to know, are you living out in Prospect Lake? He must know the area, or one of the other lakes near Yellowknife, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, close. We live straight north of the city on a really small lake, so it's not a super well-known lake, but we're on Landing Lake. It's about what, maybe 15 kilometers almost straight north of the city. So yeah.
And somebody has a suggestion for you. You could be a guide on parts of the Esker there, Dwayne. That's there's a profession for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yes, I've definitely thought of it. Yes, thank you. Yeah, it would be pretty cool to organize a gang and go do part of the Esker. That would be fun. That would be really cool. Do that 110 kilometer stretch with a gang of people would be yeah, that would be a fun endeavor.
Yeah. How heavy was your pack? Elise wants to know, and how often you had food drops.
Yeah, so my pack wasn't as light as you might hope. Because I was hiking for 40 days and I couldn't afford to break anything, it would have cost me a few $1,000s to get a flight in to replace anything. So I really needed to make sure my gear was durable, and that was way more important than lightweight. But and I even had a few redundant objects because I just couldn't afford to risk having to replace them. And especially during COVID times, there were so few flights into the tundra that basically I would have had to hire my own flight to replace anything. So anyways, my dry weight without food and water was about 35 pounds. And then with my heaviest food drop, I was, and because I hadn't been eating my suppers, I was probably just a little over 70 pounds at my heaviest. Yeah. And I had 2 food drops along the way. Yeah, that's right. 2 food drops. In retrospect, I probably should have done 1 more food drop. I could have been a little bit lighter and taken a bit more time then too. But yeah, I had one on my flight out to the east end where I began. We actually dropped a food drop along the way. So I put it in a big steel, I welded a steel box and we dropped it so to be bear proof because it was going to be there for a couple of weeks. And then I had the other one at the Tundra Ecosystem Research Station, the photo I showed.
Somebody wants to know, would you want this to become a popular adventure tourist area, or maybe leave it? You know, too much traffic might be a problem up there.
Yeah, well, you know, yeah, it's definitely, how would you say, it's definitely a fragile ecosystem. The growing season is so short that it doesn't take many footsteps on an area to cause erosion and to kill plants. But at the same time, I feel like that Esker is remote enough and expensive enough to get to that I can't imagine it would ever be overused anytime in the near future. It's just so far from communities and so expensive to get to that I don't think there'd be all that many people that you know, would go there. And yeah, I would love to see a few more people hiking at least a portion of it. It's just such a, I think, to have Canadians more aware of the tundra and wildlife on the tundra and the ecosystem in the tundra would have a lot of benefits. So I think, yeah, it'd be great for, I think, more people to be hiking that area. Yeah.
Okay. Did you see many satellites or shooting stars?
No, not many. I guess just because of the short nights. Yeah, because I was usually sleeping during the nights. I'm trying to remember, there was at the very end of my hike, there was a few nights where I saw the stars good. But I can't even remember seeing the northern lights at the end of my hike. We do often on paddling trips by the end of August have, you know, a night where we see the northern lights already, but I don't actually remember seeing them at all on this hike, even in the last couple weeks. Yeah.
Okay, I see Don has given a shout out to Jane and Paul Curran, or Jamie Bastido, still around in Yellowknife. Who knows?
Yeah, Jamie Bastido I know fairly well. He's yeah, the author. He's yeah, he's a great guy. I know him and his wife and their daughters. Jamie Bastido though and his wife now moved to, oh, where did they move? I think they live in BC now. the last time I saw them was maybe a year ago. They were back for a short period to visit. But they have one daughter who now lives in Fort Providence. So she still lives in the Northwest Territories. And their other daughter, I believe, lives in BC now too, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, it's a small world up here for sure.
Small world, yeah, yeah. So you've definitely got some people interested in hiking the Esker up there, Dwayne, just saying.
Yeah,
You can
awesome.
think about that.
Yeah, we'll have to organize a trip sometime.
Yeah, yeah. John wants to know, did you carry a sat phone or what? And you mentioned InReach at one point, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't carry a satellite phone, but I did carry an InReach, and definitely the InReach is a much lighter, cheaper option than a sat phone. So, and I took my phone along as a backup camera and a backup GPS. And so I paired my phone with my InReach, and that way I could just text from my phone and have a better screen for typing. And I even use voice to text on my phone. So it really didn't feel much different than texting, friends here in Yellowknife. So I was able to stay in really good touch that way, which helped me a lot during a solo trip. I probably wouldn't have used it so much if I was with friends on the trip, but being solo, it was nice to stay in touch with people back home.
Right, right. Jean wants to know, what did you bring two of?
Yeah, so good question. I took 2 cans of bear spray, which I think I never used them, but it was still a wise choice. I took 2 handheld marine flares as well, which were kind of last resort for bears. I guess the phone I mentioned was backup camera and backup GPS. And I ended up using it a lot for a backup GPS because my primary GPS got full. I didn't realize I had even done research to know how much space my GPS would hold and how many days of tracking I could do, but it still got full, and the Acadie mine workers emptied it for me. So then I was able to use it again, but there was a stretch where I was using my phone as backup GPS. What else did I take 2 of? That's mostly it, the bear stuff.
Underwear.
Yeah, underwear. Well, yeah, I only had 2 pairs, so I could wash one and switch, but yeah, trying to think of what else. That might be it. There wasn't that much else. Yeah, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head now. Sorry.
Yeah, pretty careful packing, I guess.
Totally.
What would be the cost? I mean, what did it cost you, I guess, to get up that far north to hike the Esker? You mentioned you had to take flights and long flights.
Yeah, it still wasn't crazy expensive. And I managed to make it a little bit cheaper by just when I was starting my hike. There was some other people that were going out to the East Arm to Dave Olson's for a trip. And so I was able to cost share a flight with them. So that saved me, I don't know, a decent amount though on that flight. But all in all, everything included, it was about $5,000.
Wow.
Which actually, really, to think of the flights out and back, it wasn't all that much, really.
Yeah, okay. And somebody wants to know, are there any scientists working up there that need support?
Yes, yeah, right, eh?
Looking for a job. There's 2 researchers at the University of Carleton in Ottawa who have been doing research on the Thelon Esker. And I actually took a bunch of photos for them while I was hiking. So one of the tasks that I did along the way while I was hiking was take both landscape shots of the Esker, but also just shots of the ground composition of the sand and gravel to know whether that specific GPS location was, sand or fine gravel or cobbles. And so I had about 3,500 waypointed photos that I sent to those researchers in Ottawa. Okay. So that helped them a lot. The one guy is working on his PhD about the Thelon Esker. So, but yeah, I don't know if they need help or if they're looking to hire people. It'd be a good way to get up there for sure. Did you use a solar charger for like your phone and other things, or? Yes,
I did. Yeah. So I had a pretty tiny solar panel. I actually managed to find a little simple, super cheap non-folding. It's just one little solid panel with a little USB connection on it. So I managed to find a panel and I used that for charging everything along the way. So, and I even took video, I was taking video footage as well. And so I was recharging the GoPro as well with that little tiny 5-watt panel. So I was definitely a little limited on power. Like I could have taken more. I prioritized my camera for sure because I wanted to get a lot of photos, but I could have taken more video footage if I had had, you know, a bigger solar panel.
Right.
Definitely limited, but
Okay.
one thing I didn't mention, I guess, yeah, on that front was that there is a video of my hike that made it into the Banff Mountain Film Festival. So it was only online. So I guess it was shown at the beginning of November, but if you guys want to watch it, I could probably find a way for you guys to see it now.
Sure. If you want to send a link or something down, I'll make sure people get it. What's it called, Dwayne?
It's what's the film called? The High Road.
A High Road. That's right. I remember looking, I saw a trailer for it.
Right. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome.
Sounds good. What did you wear in your feet? Another question.
Yeah. Oh, you know, and I guess what I wore on my feet comes back to that redundant question too. So I actually just took my Keen shoes. They were just simple hiking shoes. They're ones that I just use as my everyday hiking shoes all around town and at the cabin. And I knew they were comfortable and lightweight, but also durable. And I didn't want heavy hiking boots. So so I took those. And then I also took sandals, but I didn't take super lightweight sandals because I wanted, this was redundancy again. I wanted sandals that were heavy enough and strong enough that I knew I could hike in them in case my main hiking shoes failed for some reason, like the soles peeled off or whatever.
Right.
And I had that happen once on a canoe trip where my shoe, the whole sole just fell off of it in the first week. And lucky enough, I had shoe glue with me and was able to glue it back on. But I knew that some kind of, you know, manufacturer defect in my shoe could end my hike that way. So I took sandals along that that I was fairly confident I could hike in. So my sandals were also closed toe Keen sandals. Yeah.
Ah, good ad for Keens there. They stood up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Now, Morley, one of our paddlers is also an archaeologist, wants to know, do you know how to recognize stone tool manufacturing debris to find archaeological sites? Oh, that's a tough question, Morley.
Yeah, it is a tough question. And no, I would have to say no. I have read a little bit about tool making and stuff, but I wouldn't say that I know enough to be able to recognize that. No.
Okay, Morley, you got to.
I'd love to learn. I'd love to learn sometime, though. That'd be great.
Yeah, Morley gets around. You might see him up there one of these days.
Yeah, right. That'd be great.
Okay, so I think we've gone through the questions in the chat. I'll just give people a chance. If you have something burning in your mind, just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. Okay, we may have exhausted the questions, and thank you for answering them all, Dwayne. That was very nice of you. And I don't know whether you're going to see a lot of people up in the Eskers right away, but I definitely got a sort of a tide of enthusiasm for looking at that Thelon Esker up there.
Awesome. Yes.
Great. So I'm just gonna turn it over to Fred now, and Fred's gonna properly thank you, I think.
Okay.
Dwayne, thank you very much for a really interesting presentation. It's one of the most unusual ones we've had, although there was a little bit of paddling in it. We usually thank our people by giving them one of our much sought after Siska mugs, and I'll get your address offline and mail it up to you. When we were planning to do our November meeting, Alan and I were talking about whether we're going to do a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting. And most of our presenters are either on the island or from the lower mainland. And Alan and I agreed, well, we can pay for this guy to come over to Victoria and do it live, until I found out he lived in Yellowknife. So that idea kind of died real quick. Again, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Before I go, though, I want to share a couple of quick things. For people that have ordered mugs. I put the order in last week, so they should be here in 3 or 4 weeks. So hopefully they'll be here before Christmas. If any of the mugs that people ordered were planning to be Christmas gifts. And I'm going to do one last ad for the calendar. So I'll probably order the calendars next week. So if you're still interested in wanting to have them place an order with me, would you please send me an email? And that's everything I have. So back to you, Alan.
Okay, thanks, Fred. And just to Dwayne, one further thing, Dwayne, you may not get down to the south as we are, I guess, very often, but I heard you say that you went fishing out of Telegraph Cove and, you know, a bit about the island. So I'll put this out there. Some of us, and me included, have not one, but several kayaks in our basement. So if you ever come to Victoria or you're coming down this way, you've got my email, you let me know. We'll get you out on the water here. And then you can see, you can decide, you know, whether you like the nice, calm, clear waters of the north or maybe the more active sea waters we have around here. Anyway, that would be great.
Thank you, Alan. That would be, yeah, that would be fabulous. That would be an amazing treat. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll keep that in my mind for sure. Yeah.
Please do.
Such a treat to connect with all of you down on Vancouver Island. Yeah, it's been a few years now since I've been that way, but yeah, I've probably been to the island at least a half dozen times with my parents and 1 or 2 of my brothers for fishing trips when I was younger. So yeah, and I loved that area. I love Telegraph Cove. There was wild bunnies there that I would chase as a kid. You know, I was like 10 years old chasing wild bunnies around Telegraph Cove campsite. But yeah, the ocean was awesome down there, and I loved, yeah, the smell of the sea, and yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, we got a date. If you do get down here, you let me know. And
okay, well, thank you.
Before we get to the prize draw, I know you're all holding your breath for the prize draw, but I forgot to mention, which is uncharacteristic of me, on behalf of the chief elf, who may still be online, Jenny Sutton, that we have not 1, but 2 Christmas events coming up. I know that you've been probably inundated with emails about this, but, you know, just emphasize it again. We have a Zoom party on Wednesday, December 8th at 7, and there's a lot to say about that, which I won't right now. And then we have a paddle, early morning paddle, and then a luncheon party at Gyro Saturday, December 11th. So those are both Christmas themed events, which the Siska elves have been planning, and we thank Jenny and the other elves for doing that. So please keep those in mind. And without further ado, over to one such elf who happens also to be Debbie Leach, in charge of safety prizes.
Okay, so this month we have a level 6 paddle float, 2 reusable glow sticks that are blue so they don't get confused with any navigational aids, and some anchor straps for tying things down on your boat or connecting up with somebody else. So I've got everybody's name that was online in this Siska mug. And the winner, Sybil and Yerrick, are you still online? Oh, no. Okay.
I don't know. Dwayne, can you stop sharing your presentation so we can see folks a bit?
Oh, yes. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, Sybil and Yerrick?
Yeah, I see them.
Okay, good. So, okay, so
there we go.
I'll email you and we can figure out how to connect up with those. Okay, super.
Thanks.
Perfect. Okay. And that, I think, brings us to a conclusion. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Once again, thanks, Dwayne, for tuning in. It's an hour later up there in the NWT, you know, so right. He's got to get home now in the dark, but appreciate your time, Dwayne, very much. And happy paddling, everybody. Apparently tomorrow is going to be a decent day. You know, we do alternate days here, Dwayne. One is an atmospheric river. The next day is sunny. So today the river, tomorrow apparently we're going to have a decent day.
Okay.
All right, enjoy, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
We'll go a little further tomorrow, Alan.
Yeah, try and go further.
Thanks so much. That was wonderful.
Yeah, good night, everybody.